Hi everyone, my name is Mariam Gizani. I'm a PhD student at Oregon State University, and today I will be presenting our paper, How to Debug Inclusivity Bugs, a debugging process with information architecture. Diverse teams have been shown to be more productive as well as more innovative. One form of diversity is cognitive diversity, which helps generate diversity of thoughts. However, cognitive diversity is not often supported in software tools, where software tools are not inclusive of individuals with different cognitive styles. For example, those who like to learn through process versus those who learn by tinkering, which then can burden these individuals with a cognitive tax. What are inclusivity bugs? In the testing community, Aman and Ofut define a failure as external incorrect behavior with respect to the requirements or expected behavior. Now, by analogy, our requirements or expected behavior is inclusivity across diverse cognitive styles. So we define inclusivity failures or bugs as user-visible features or workflows that do not equitably support users with diverse cognitive styles. With Aman and Ofut's definition, an inclusivity bug is a barrier, but not necessarily a showstopper. For example, if groups of users eventually complete their task but disproportionately experience barriers along the way, like confusion, missteps, or workarounds, these two are inclusivity bugs. So the takeaway is that inclusivity bugs are biases in software that introduce inequity. Sarah is a chemical engineering student who is currently working on her senior capstone project. She is a comprehensive learner, she doesn't like to tinker, and she has little spare time. While working on the project, she finds out that there's an open source project that she can use. So to do that, she starts going through the project and trying to set up the environment on her local machine. However, she gets confused and lost in setting up the environment. She looks at the different documentations and she looks throughout the project, but she ends up feeling like she is wasting time and ends up abandoning the project. It turns out, though, that all the information that she needed was there. But it was so fragmented and disorganized that it made it impossible for her to find and use. And this is an example of a project that would hinder comprehensive and process-oriented users. So our goal is to increase support for cognitive diversity within technology environments, especially information-heavy ones. One particular example of information-heavy environments are OSS projects, which is the scope of our study as it is particularly challenged in attracting diverse populations. To do this, we conduct a multi-stage in the field and in the lab empirical investigation to analyze whether changing the IA of an OSS project infrastructure would help support newcomers across a range of diverse cognitive styles. To do this, we need to debug these inclusivity bugs. So previous research has found ways to find inclusivity bugs, which are biases in software that introduce inequities. However, going from finding to fixing can be challenging. But without a process to move from finding to fixing these bugs, acting on fixing these bugs will turn into an ad hoc activity depending on individual developers' skills at that time. In this paper, we present WhyWe'reFix, a systematic inclusivity debugging process. The why part is about finding inclusivity failures, which is analogous to testing. But because it's not about producing a wrong input, practitioners would also need to discern why the observed phenomenon is considered an inclusivity failure. The where is about tying the inclusivity failure to the fault, or faults, which is analogous to fault localization. The fix is about fixing the inclusivity fault to stop the associated inclusivity failure. To find such inclusivity bugs in their whys, we use GenderMag, an empirically validated method with a dual gender cognitive focus. GenderMag integrates finding an inclusivity bug with its why because using GenderMag includes identifying cognitive mismatches that pinpoint which users disproportionately run into barriers using a system. After finding a bug, the next step in debugging is to figure out what and where a bug's causes are, referred to as faults in software engineering literature. We define an inclusivity fault as the user-facing component, for example, a UI element or user-facing documentation, workflow of the system that produced an inclusivity bug. Once we've enumerated the implicated IA elements involved, we go to fixing, which is about changing the IA elements by using also the cognitive styles that were the whys to create a more equitable and inclusive software. GenderMag is a cognitive walkthrough method with a dual gender and cognitive diversity lens. The GenderMag method has 3 personas representative of a range of users, from the perspective of 5 facets of cognitive styles: motivations, information processing style, computer self-efficacy, risk aversiveness, and learning style. Example tinkering. Each facet has a range of possible values. On the right side, we can see the 3 personas. So we have the Abby persona at one extremity, and the Tim persona is at the other end of the spectrum, and the Pat persona is in the middle. Let's take an example of a facet, the learning style facet, and see what are the different values for Abby and Tim. For instance, Abby learns best through process-oriented learning. Example, through processes or algorithms, not just individual features. On the other hand, Tim is more of a tinkerer. They like trying out new features, but sometimes they tend to get distracted or lose track, and then they have to backtrack. We will adopt the definition of Rosenfeld and Morville that defines IA as a set of 4 systems. The organization system is analogous to building rooms. It has an organization scheme and an organization structure. The organization scheme is the way content is arranged or grouped, like alphabetical or by task. The organization structure defines the relationship between content groups, for example, hierarchical. The navigation system, analogous to adding doors and windows to the building, enables users to traverse the information groupings and structure. The navigation system could be embedded to the content, like contextual links, or supplemental to the content, like sitemaps. The labeling system adds signposts, also known as cues in information foraging literature, to the doors, such as labels on contextual links or headers, for example. Now, the search system, when provided, supplements the rest of the IA to enable users to retrieve information by looking up a particular term or phrase. Our research questions are RQ1, is IA implicated in inclusivity bugs? If so, how? In RQ2, can practitioners use IA to fix inclusivity bugs? If so, how? To answer these questions, we follow a methodology that is divided into 2 phases. A field study, where we had a Team F that owns an open source project apply the why-where fix process to 4 use cases that they judged important for their project. After applying the why-where fix method and after fixing the project, they had the diversity enhanced project. In the lab study, we brought participants to the lab and divided them into 2 groups to accomplish tasks relative to the 4 use cases, where one group used the original project while the other used the diversity enhanced project. Team F used the IA supplemented GenderMag method and the Abby persona to find inclusivity bugs in their OSS project, and that would be the why, and the IA elements associated with the bugs, which would be the where. When doing this, they used 4 use cases that were important to their project. For example, finding an issue to work on or setting up the environment. And they found out that IA elements are indeed implicated in real-world inclusivity bugs. Out of the bugs they found, they selected 6 inclusivity bugs to fix. using this criteria. The bug selected had at least one cognitive facet that the information architecture did not support, and second, the bugs were associated with the project itself and not the UI of the hosting platform, example, GitHub or GitLab. By using the why and where data, they fixed these 6 bugs, and the result was the Diversity Enhanced project. Now for the lab study, we brought OSS newcomers into the lab to investigate whether OSS newcomers using the original version would run into the bugs Team F had found in the original version, and also whether the IA fixes that Team F has delivered for the Diversity Enhanced version would actually improve support for cognitively diverse OSS newcomers. We recruited 31 participants from a large US university. These participants filled out a background and cognitive style facet survey, which helped us select 18 respondents to gender balance and include a wide variety of cognitive styles. This resulted in our participants having this gender distribution: 8 women, 9 men, and 1 declined to specify their gender. We assigned participants to the original or diversity enhanced treatment, balancing the cognitive styles between the 2 groups. This resulted in this graph, which represents the number of participants with ABI versus TIM facets who used the original versus diversity enhanced, and they have the same distribution shown here. So ABI's facets are in orange and TIM's facets are in blue. Let's take an example. For motivation, we had in both the groups 4 participants that had a motivation value that was more like ABI's, and 5 participants that had motivation values that was more like TIM's. Now, participants were given tasks to accomplish the same 4 use cases that Team F evaluated and fixed. For example, finding an issue to work on. And the participants were distributed. 9 participants were using the original project to do that, and 9 participants were using the Diversity Enhanced project to do that. While they were going through the task, we audio recorded each participant as they talked aloud while working on their use cases, and we transcribed the recordings. We collected how often participants encountered one of the 6 bugs that Team F has attempted to fix. We also qualitatively coded cognitive facets that participants verbalized when they encountered one of these bugs, which enabled us later on to compare participants' in situ reaction to their cognitive facet questionnaire responses. For our results, we found that OSS newcomers using the original project actually did run into the bugs that Team F had found in the original version. And we can see this in Table 3. For the original project, the total bugs encountered were 20. We also found that the IA fixes that Team F had derived for the Diversity Enhanced version actually helped improve support for cognitively diverse OSS newcomers. And we can see this in the Diversity Enhanced column with only 2 total bugs encountered. So the number of bugs encountered went from 20 to 2 between the 2 versions. And the why were fixed process reduced the number of inclusivity bugs by 90%. But what about equity? A dictionary definition of equity is the quality of being fair and impartial. We measured equity by analyzing the lab participants' data because the participants covered an almost equal number of ABI and TIM's facets, so 22 of ABI's facet and 23 of TIM's facets in each treatment. So if the lab participants' number of ABI facet affected by a bug was greater than the number of TIM's facet, or vice versa, we conclude that the bug was inequitable in the way it affected the participants. Let's take an example of bug 1 and 2. So the colors of the shapes reflect the facet survey results, which we are not using for computing this, but we are using the outlines. So when it's a orange outline, it means it's an ABI facet that was verbalized during the think aloud. when it is a blue outline, it means it's a TIM facet that was verbalized during the think aloud. So for instance, bug 1 and 2 were inequitable in the original version. The reason why is because 14 of participants' Abby's facet, the orange outlines, were affected compared to only 5 of Tim's facet, the blue outlines. Similarly, bug 1 and 2 were also inequitable in the diversity enhanced version, but they were slightly inequitable, because here we can see that 2 of participants' Abby's facets were affected and none of Tim's facets were affected. So we notice here that for bug 1 and 2, the diversity enhanced version was less inequitable than the original version. And we applied a similar analysis for all the other bugs. And we found that the IA fixes did indeed make the project more equitable. What about inclusion? So a dictionary definition is that inclusion is the action or state of including or being included within a group or structure. So we will conclude here that the bug fix was inclusive if the number of lab participants' facets affected by a bug decreased from the original version to the diversity enhanced version for participants' Abby's facets and also for participants' Tim's facets. So recall from the previous slide that after the fix, the Abby facets affected decreased from 12 to 2, and the Tim's facets affected also decreased from 5 to 0. So there, we conclude that the fixes for bug 1 and 2 improved inclusivity, and the same observation is made for the remaining bugs. And this table 5 summarizes for the different bugs. So here we can see for every bug and every facet value, participants' Abby's facets and Tim's facets all ran into fewer barriers in the diversity enhanced version. And this means that the IA fixes made the project more inclusive across the different cognitive styles. Now, another finding on validating the facet survey. We found that overall 78% of participants' in situ facet verbalization when they were thinking aloud aligned with their facet questionnaire responses, which suggests that this instrument can be used to measure participants' facets values. To conclude, we presented Why Where Fix, a systematic inclusivity debugging process. We empirically investigated how information architecture can itself be the cause of inclusivity bugs. But it can also be part of the solution. In fact, we revealed ways OSS projects can improve their infrastructure's information architecture to improve their project's inclusivity. For instance, Team F's IA fixes reduced the number of inclusivity bugs the participants experienced by 90%. These results provide encouraging evidence that the Why Where Fix process provides an effective way to increase the equity and inclusion of information-rich environments like OSS projects. Another takeaway is that inclusivity fixes used in our process does not support one population at the expense of another. Instead, it produced positive effects across diverse cognitive style. Thank you for watching.